Welcome, welcome. Happy Hunger Games. And may the odds be ever in your favor.
Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of Hollywood Gold. I'm your host, Daniela Taplin Lundberg, and I'm here in person with Becca Camerata, my right-hand woman. Hey, Bex.
Hey, Daniela. It's good to see you.
It's so good to see you. I love when we're staring at each other across the table. It's so much better.
So much better.
We talk about this a lot. I feel like we keep hitting themes over and over and over. I feel so bad for the people who listen every week because they're like, you mentioned this last week, Daniela.
They're like, it's so good to see you.
You mentioned that this is your favorite movie last week. So we're about to dive into The Hunger Games with lead producer Nina Jacobson, who is a legend in the business. And we've actually mentioned her on the pod before. If loyal listeners recall, she actually gave Deborah Martin Chase a deal when she was president of Disney. And so I'm excited to hear about Nina's journey from being studio head to producer. I think she was quite reluctant. And she's become one of the most prolific producers in Hollywood. She's responsible for not only the Hunger Games franchise, which just released its latest film.
That is doing so well.
So incredibly well with Rachel Ziegler. But she did Diary of a Wimpy Kid. She did Crazy Rich Asians, which we've also done. We interviewed Brad Simpson, her partner. They're responsible for like Ryan Murphy's television shows. I mean, they're like incredible. So I'm so excited to dive in with her.
Let's go.
Legendary Nina Jacobson, it is so nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to talk about Hunger Games today.
Oh, me too. I love talking about Hunger Games.
You've produced many, many films and you used to run a studio, but I would venture to say that this is probably your most successful. Would you say that's accurate?
I'd say that's fair. I think that's fair.
It spawned many sequels. It's like, it's every producer's dream, right? So I want you to take me to the very beginning when you first read Suzanne Collins' book, how you got it, and then we'll tell the tale of the tape.
Well, it was really still fairly early in my producing career, so had very, public firing from Disney in 2006.
Okay.
That I did not see coming at all. No idea whatsoever. And at that point, I loved being an executive. When people would get inevitably fired from their jobs, they would always say, well, producing has always been my lifelong dream. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. It was not my lifelong dream. And I never, when I became an executive, I didn't see myself as that I would love being a suit, but I actually did love being a suit.
By the way, I love you already so much for this honesty and transparency. I can tell this is one of my favorite conversations. So continue. Great.
So I was surprised at how much I loved being a suit. It was a very different time to be a suit. When I was the head of production at Disney, we had, Disney, Touchstone, Hollywood Pictures, and we made there was such a variety of the kinds of movies that we could make.
Talk about like some of the movies that you made happen while you were at Disney, just so we can have like some context.
As an executive, I was working on things that ranged from, starting the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. We did Narnia.
Yes.
We did Princess Diaries, Freaky Friday. We did all these sports movies that I loved. Remember the Titans?
Yeah, of course.
And The Rookie, The Miracle. And actually, we were really trying to grow the definition of the Disney brand as a live action brand at that time, and let's say it's such a different time from now where that definition has really contracted again to these kind of core properties.
Yes.
But at the time we were taking things like Remember the Titans, which had been Touchstone development, and bringing them into the Disney brand. At the same time, we had Night Shyamalan was making his movies with us. The Coen brothers were making movies with us. I made The Prestige.
So Sixth Sense happened under your watch.
Yes.
Incredible.
Sixth Sense. I actually went to Disney from DreamWorks because they told me I could work on Sixth Sense.
Oh my God.
Because I lost it at DreamWorks and then they got it at Hollywood pictures. And then they said, well, if you come here and leave your job, you can work on it.
Oh my God.
And so I loved that. And I was like, well, why would I be a producer where I have to try to convince people to do things when I actually get to decide largely, obviously within the system that I worked in, but really getting to decide what we were making. So I get fired. I'm like, well, I'm certainly not going to become a producer. Very nice that I had that opportunity. I didn't want to stay at Disney, but I had worked.
So they offered you a producing deal, which is like sometimes what happens when a studio head leaves the post.
Yes, they offered me a producing deal. I was like, no, thank you. I really don't want to be producing for the people who just broke my heart.
Right.
It was just like too hard. And so, but I had worked at DreamWorks as an executive prior.
Okay.
Spielberg called, they called right away, Stacey Snider, and be like, come be a producer here. And it's like, give me a little time. I'm going to see what I'm going to do. And I took like 6 months off. My wife was in labor when I was fired.
Stop. Oh my God.
So I was like, well, I'll just figure out another executive job. And then there weren't jobs that seemed like I was going to, there are only so many jobs at the head of this,
right.
studio. And so like none of those jobs were available. After about 6 months of taking time off, just being with our kids, I was like, okay, I guess I'll have to do the producing thing, at least until I can get another executive.
Okay. So this was like, just like a carryover to like whatever your next gig was going to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So now we're in beginning of 2008 and I'm starting from scratch. I have no projects, of course, because I've gone to DreamWorks. I haven't stayed at Disney and attached myself to my own projects that I had been an executive for. I don't really even, which I just didn't want to do that anyway. And so in trying to build a company, I think I found that like what I missed so much from being at Disney was that like, I liked having a North Star. I liked having kind of a religion and, sort of servicing a brand. That was the religion for me, the North Star. And I kind of didn't find what my new religion would be until we started working with Jeff Kinney on the Wimpy Kid movies because his voice was so specific. Those books were so specific. I also had at that point met Brad Simpson. And when I started on Wimpy Kid, I asked him to come and partner with me on it because we had worked on a Doomed project together that was like a pre-strike of 2008 movie that we were supposed to make together that he had been developing. We really got to know each other through like all the wrong things happening. And the fact that we felt so connected through like adverse circumstances. And I saw how much I still had to learn about producing that he knew, having spent much more time on the ground, me having spent so much time behind a desk. So on those Wimpy Kid movies, we partnered up.
And Wimpy Kid was like the books were already published and that was the first sort of series that you went after?
That book and another book called One Day by David Nichols. Those were like my first projects as a producer. And so what I found while working on those was that the voice of the novelist in these cases became like that religion for me. The voice of the novelist, the book that I had loved. What was it about the book that I loved?
Yes.
How do I keep that alive? That became like the brand. That Disney had been to me. That became like what was the organizing principle that gave me a sense of purpose and a focus. Something to cherish, something to protect like that. I just found that I needed that.
Yeah.
Then, we were a young company. Like I said, Brad was not part of the company yet. I was borrowing him from another company at that point. So we're a young company. I have a great young executive working for me, Brian Uncliffe.
Yes, of course.
He's roaming the bookstores and comes across The Hunger Games.
So it was already published.
It's published. It's in bookstores.
No way.
It is sitting in a shelf at a bookstore. He had loved Gregor the Overlander, her previous series. He reads the book. He's like, you've got to read this book. So I read the book and I am like instantly obsessed and consumed by this book. And what I love too is that the whole time I was reading it, I've kind of developed over time this sort of very simple questions that I ask myself when I'm reading a script or watching a movie, which is like, what do I want and what do I fear? And if I have something to want and something to fear, I'm all in.
Okay. Brilliant.
And actually, if you look through a lot of effective movies through that prism, you'll realize, like, yes, at every moment I'm wanting something or I'm afraid of something happening. Don't do that. Please do that. Oh God, don't, And so with her book, with Suzanne's book, I both had like this intense, obviously I'm both desperately wanted her to get back to District 12. I was incredibly afraid both that she wouldn't, but also what she would do to get back would like break my connection to this character. And to see the way that Suzanne had like walked this razor's edge.
Yes.
And to watch this character of Katniss expanding from like her sort of circle of concern, her circle of like, who do I care about? And watching this character over the course of this book expand her circles of concern to first go beyond her own family and her own survival to both, to PETA, obviously, over time, her district, and ultimately, like by the end of the series, to her like country,
right.
And I loved seeing a young woman who's not born to be a hero, but who becomes one through like a series of choices that she is forced to make. And that those choices ultimately make her a revolutionary. And I loved how subversive that was. And I was just like obsessed with it.
Was the book a sensation when you read it?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay.
The book was doing like well, but Catching Fire brought the first book up into the bestseller.
Were you reading the first book before the second book came out, or were you reading
Yes.
it? Okay.
The second book was in manuscript form, and eventually Suzanne let me read. Actually, she wanted me to read it, I think so. I can't remember if I read the second book before our first conversation or after.
Okay.
But the second book was still in galleys, and so it hadn't been published yet.
And so the rights were available?
Yes, the rights were available.
Crazy.
Part of it was that Suzanne wanted to know that whoever was going to do it had already read the second book and was good with where the series went, because she writes through character, but she writes from theme. And she had these big ideas that are being explored in the books. And so I finally had this phone call with her. I got to remember like where I was, what room in my house I was in, the pacing, which I do all the time, being so nervous and excited. And basically, I talked to her about this book and the tonal bandwidth that she managed to find in her work, and that fine line that she managed to walk, on the one hand, like exploring the commodification of violence, and on the other hand, not commodifying violence herself. We talked about the concentric circles of concern.
Wow.
And so we had this amazing conversation, and I made my case that I hoped that she would choose me for the town, that I would not get like a territory or two, because I wanted to make the decision with her about where we should sell it.
You want to be her partner? Yes.
Yes. And so we had that conversation, and she ultimately said yes to me, which was one of the most thrilling and exciting moments ever.
At that point, were there a few competitors? Were there a few producers sort of vying for her affection?
There were some competitive producers. There were, for sure. She met a bunch of producers. But when we went out with it, we got several passes, which wasn't that surprising. I mean, it is about kids killing kids.
Yep.
And a female lead in an action-y role. The YA thing hadn't happened yet.
Right. That's so wild.
So a lot of the decisions that we've made, and I'm sure Brad talked about this with Crazy Rich Asians, they seem really counterintuitive at the time. People don't, it often are kind of breaking some rule that you've been told.
Yes.
And this broke several rules, which I found very appealing. And so, when we went to the marketplace, we had passes, but really of the meetings we had, the meeting we had at Lionsgate was the head of marketing was there at the time, Tim Palin.
Mm-hmm.
The people who would ultimately say yes to the movie were all in the room. And we talked about, our intentions, and particularly that it would be a faithful adaptation, that we would not age up the characters. I had people, ask, do they have to be called Peeta and Katniss? Couldn't they just be like Peter and Kat? Those kinds of things at other places.
Sure.
Certainly the impulse to age up the characters so that
Yes. You can cast people who have more value, blah, blah, blah. Yes.
Exactly. And it'd be much more palatable to say they're between 18 and 25 than between 12 to 18.
Right.
So Lionsgate, who didn't have anything like this because they had not merged with Summit yet, so they didn't have Twilight.
Yes.
Lionsgate felt like, again, it was a counterintuitive choice because we did have a couple of suitors, but having been an executive, for one, I know like how hard it is to actually like make your way from the development pile to the production.
Yes.
And to the release slate. And that's something that is subversive and edgy and sort of demanding of the audience is this. It would be very easy for a studio to get cold feet.
Yes.
And very, very easy. I know the pressures of being like a big corporation and what the demands are and how easy it is to be like, just not worth it for us, or whatever those kind of safer choices that you feel sometimes obligated to make on behalf of shareholders.
Right.
Whereas Lionsgate needed to have a movie like this, wanted to have a movie like this. It was going to be one of their crown jewels. So we chose them
smart
over like what might have been more obvious choices to most people. And they were all in, from the beginning. And so at first, Suzanne, who had, prior to being a novelist, after being a country music DJ, prior to being a novelist, had written for like kids television.
Oh my God. I didn't get to that part of her bio.
Yeah, I know. Like she'd written these incredibly dark and complicated books, but she also wrote like some great episodes of Little Bear. And so she and I worked, and Brian. This was so early, actually, in my deal. I think that at this point, my offices we were like on Market Street in Venice when we were having a bunch of these.
Yeah. Eating from like taco trucks.
Yeah. And so we would have these long, like hours long meetings where we would go through the book, go through what the script was going to be. Suzanne wrote the first draft, and through kind of this like really close collaboration, I really came to understand what her priorities were, what mattered to her, like what my North Star would be.
I volunteer as tribute. I believe we have a volunteer.
Yeah, our mentor is supposed to tell us how to get sponsors and give us advice.
Oh, okay. Embrace the probability of your imminent death.
Were you ever reluctant to let her do a pass of the script?
It always is scary because of the fact that that relationship is so important. And so, like, you have to know, and you have to talk about this. When a novelist adapts their own work, there is a very good chance that you will replace them at a certain point.
Yeah.
It is rare and amazing when one writer can take you all the way.
Yeah.
And at the time that I was doing this, oftentimes authors weren't involved at all in the adaptation of their book. You would sell the book.
Yeah.
And then the author, maybe they would see it before it came out, but they weren't a partner, because people felt like, oh, this could be too limiting. There's too many chefs, etc.
Right.
But what I found with Suzanne, she was very sophisticated. After we had this first draft come in, I felt like I understood a lot about the material, and I also didn't think we had a movie yet.
Yep.
And so we had that conversation. She was amazing about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we brought in Billy Ray.
Cool.
And that collaboration, Suzanne loved working with screenwriters. So that was another thing, is that
cool.
She loved that other role. She loved being a partner to the screenwriter. And what I found that was really interesting is that I loved the book so much that like there were ideas that would stray from the material that she would be willing to try, like bringing Gale into the Capitol, for instance, so that he has more to do. Ideas that like, I was like, no, like as a fan, that's going to really bug me.
Yeah.
But she was willing to try it. And I was like, well, if she's willing to try it, I have to be willing to try it. I have to trust the process enough to know that like you shouldn't shut down an idea. If there are smart people who believe in it, you shouldn't just shut it down based on one person's opinion, your own. And so, and then we tried it and it died a natural death, which was, a relief.
Right.
Um,
But is Billy Ray going away and doing a draft and then showing it to you and Suzanne, or how is that working?
Yes, Billy worked closely with Suzanne in like kind of talking in, going into it, getting like the download.
Yeah.
Having read her script and talking to her about what it should be. She's, let's say, very generous. She loves screenwriters. And she's a real structuralist, so she knows like what is essential for her books. She knows what she's willing to bend on, what she's not willing to bend on. And so Billy gave us a really good draft that was starting to feel like a movie. We were then able, from that draft, I got an incoming call from Gary Ross, and I was actually in London shooting one day,
Mm-hmm.
and Gary flew to London to talk to me about coming on board as a writer-director. And we knew each other from my from my executive days at Universal, my first like executive job was at Universal.
And Gary Ross had done like Seabiscuit to our loyal listeners.
Pleasantville, Seabiscuit, big writer, director. And also like a huge like script doctor. He was probably in that, like a Billy Ray or Scott Frank, one of those top go-to guys.
Had you shown this Billy Ray draft to the studio? Like, was everyone excited about the direction and like we were moving forward?
Yes, it was moving forward. We weren't greenlit, but we were moving forward.
Okay.
It was we were heading in the right direction. Because Billy's a great writer. I mean, really, Billy can write a script you can't put down. But Gary came in with great insights, great kind of love of these characters.
Fan of Hunger Games, fan of the books. Like, had he been a
fan of the fan of the book? Really loved the book, and also I think really understood what Suzanne was after. Because for her, I mean, what I love about any great book, like there's not one theme that everybody has to agree on. But for Suzanne, these were about, underneath it all, this sort of idea of just war theory. And can there be such a thing as a just war? When is violence just? And whether it is or isn't just, what are the consequences of that violence? What's the impact of that violence? And what does it mean to live with that violence? But she also brought in all of this Roman history and Roman names and Roman practices. She was also looking at the explosion of reality TV juxtaposed against the forever wars that we were in the middle of in Iraq and Afghanistan, the endless, interminable wars, and these questions of, are they just? Are they not? And regardless of whether they are or they aren't, how they are sold, right? And how the fact that like for every new war, there's like a bunch of new chyrons and imagery that boom, they have on the news,
Brilliant.
And so he really understood the bigger ideas. He really understood the characters. As a filmmaker, I think that his films are like beautifully cast, beautifully rendered.
Agree.
And so we, teamed up. He and Suzanne met and connected. Studio was on board.
Were there other filmmakers that you were sort of tempted by, or did he sort of win the day from the moment you sat with him?
He won the day, and he had the hustle, like the knowing, like they're getting ready to go to filmmakers. I'm going to get on a plane and come to her before she can even get back. And the fact that he was a writer-director was very appealing to me. At that point, once we had Gary, we were sort of like moving towards like, yes, we were rewriting, but rewriting with an eye towards production. He had to pitch himself to the studio. He had to do a whole visual presentation. Like he had to really do his dog and pony.
Because he wasn't sort of known for this kind of thing?
Yeah. By the way, really nobody was known for this kind of thing at that moment. And it was a big to-do for them. That first movie, we ended up making it at like a little over 60 something. And it was like the most expensive movie they'd ever made.
Wow. Yeah.
I think we ended up at like 64 or something like that. And it was the most expensive movie they'd ever made. Like it was a huge leap. And there came this moment where they wanted us to get the budget down. And in order to get the budget down, we would have to forego our release date. And like, I had to like inhabit the suit to convince them that like the date that we had for this movie was the right date for this movie, and why I felt that it would be catastrophic for us to miss that date.
Nina, I just have to stop you there and just say that's brilliant. Like to be able to switch into that mindset as opposed to just trying to be the producer to get the thing made, but like sit in their seat and be like, all right, how do I use this brain to stick to my date? I just love that. That's probably why you're so successful as a producer, you know?
Well, I think that at least executives know that, like, I empathize with their pain. I know, like, the challenges of being on their side of the desk. I know the things you're afraid of on that side of the desk and what you need from a partner that you don't always get, honestly. And being treated as a partner, not an adversary, that you're in it together. It's very easy to, like, decide, like, oh, filmmakers are the good guys, suits are the bad guys. You know, and by the way, vice versa. When you're a suit, it's very easy to get that, you know, mindset as well. It's like just really destructive.
100%.
So we were able to hold our date.
What was the date?
March 23rd. That was like, and we had, you know, I worked for Dick Cook at Disney, and he was, you know, a distribution guy forever, and really watching him, like the art of the date.
Yes.
And what that was a spring break date.
Oh.
And you have these rolling spring breaks, right? Everybody has a different spring break. So you need to get ahead. You need to be at the beginning of everybody's spring break. And then you get real days, right? You can get weekend days during the week. And then you get like another round of different people coming out of school at different times.
Brilliant.
And so we switched to the Thanksgiving date afterwards because we, you know, in order to be able to make that next movie.
Right.
And still sort of stay on some kind of schedule. And then that became our date. And we have loved that date and stayed there for all the remaining movies.
So you stuck to the date. Did you have to reduce the budget? Like, what was that negotiation?
No, we finally like had to, you know, and we won the game of chicken.
Okay. You won the game of chicken. Got it.
You know, we whittled down the budget a bit. I think we all got our deals squeezed like you always do, like that whole thing.
So you're off to the races. Talk about casting. Talk about your crew, where you're shooting. Like, give me that like pre-production push.
So Deb Zane, she's a fantastic casting director. And the casting for that movie and finding your Katniss Everdeen, we auditioned lots of people. And while we were casting, Winter's Bone came out.
Okay.
And Winter's Bone, which is basically an extended audition for Katniss Everdeen.
Okay. Right. Of course.
You know, and amazing. I love the movie, and her performance.
She got an Oscar nom for it, right?
Yeah. I mean, she was extraordinary. And I will always remember she came in to read, and she was reading the goodbye scene after Katniss is reaped, as she has to say goodbye to Prim and Gale. And she's reading with Deb Zane, and Deb starts to choke up during the reading.
Oh my God.
She gets like a little catch in her voice during the reading. I mean, it was just one of those auditions that like you're never going to recover from. Nobody's going to be able to touch that audition afterwards. Like, there's no way. Like, there's just once that you see that audition, like, there's nobody's ever going to have an audition like that after her.
Nina, let me ask you something, though, because she was new. I mean, she had like this splash with this Winter's Bone, which was a very small movie. But was that a conversation you had to convince anyone at the studio of? Were they looking for bigger names? Did they let you just sort of cast who was right creatively right away?
They mostly really did let us, partly because of the age of these characters. Like, who's a young star at 19 or 20, you know? I mean, Jen was actually, 22 at the moment. But, like, who's already broken as a star, right? You either have been a child actor.
Yes.
Right? But keep in mind, the rule of thumb was also nobody wants to see movies with kids in them as the lead.
Yes.
Right? That was until Harry Potter, like,
right.
You know, really proved that theory wrong. But that was like one of those Hollywood wisdom things that was not very wise.
Yes.
The one that was the most annoying one was, well, I was told like repeatedly by a lot of men who I work for, you just have to understand girls will relate to a male protagonist, boys will not relate to a female protagonist.
Oh, Jesus.
And like that, basically that white men are the O positive blood type of representation. And that, you know, you're like, really? Because, you know, it's funny that you would say that. So somebody like you mean.
Right.
Right.
Totally.
And that other one is that people won't relate to a character who's younger than them. Right. So if a character is 12, your audience is 11 and below. Like, this is like, what is this some kind of like science? Like, it's not a science. By the way, if you're making, like, say, Harry Potter certainly blew that out of the water. And when you made Wimpy Kid, we were like, okay, yes, we know that like 20-year-olds aren't going to see the Wimpy Kid movie. We're making these movies at $20 million. Like, we're going to make them at a price that we know that we're going to have 7 to 11-year-olds who are reading these books and their parents. That's our audience. So Jen gives this extraordinary audition. It becomes like really undeniable that she's our person. Then we have to do chemistry reads to find our guys. And we brought in different guys and mix and match and tried this guy and that guy and this guy and that guy. And Josh just gave us, he's just such a beautiful actor. Such a very
so sweet. And yeah,
such a beautiful actor and really very sophisticated actor because he was very experienced. He had really grown up as a face we all knew. And yet he really, he was really like had a proper craft.
Yeah.
And then Liam, who just like was that like strong, likable, man of few words, like handsome, feels like, of course, you should be in love with him. Like that Josh is the underdog in that relationship. And then, and I'd really credit Gary, his relationships, his writing, and his taste with that we went after for our other characters, our adults, the right actor for the right role at the right time.
Yes.
And so like Liz Banks, who he has this history with, like, that's like not an obvious idea. And he really felt like she was perfect for Effie, and she was. And so he had great eye for casting.
Yeah.
And, actors really trusted him.
Stanley Tucci, like you guys, like Phil Hoffman in the second one. I mean, you guys really were like the prestige.
Yeah, I mean, and that set the tone for being able to have really great actors, like I say, in these roles. Donald Sutherland, right?
Donald Sutherland. I mean, come on.
So, Wes Bentley, like we had a great cast, an amazing cast, and like say Deb, tireless, but also like just that set the tone for how we cast the rest of the movie.
Hope. It is the only thing stronger than fear.
Deep in the meadow, under the willow, a bed of grass.
And I will say, your crew also is like top tier, just prestige crew. Like I was watching the credits because I just watched it again like 2 days ago. Just like the very best of the best.
Yeah, we aimed high. One of the most valuable pieces of advice I was ever given, and this was when I was at DreamWorks, I was working on an idea for an animated movie. Actually, it became Ants, right? But I had never done an animated movie. And Jeffrey was like, well, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I have never done a family movie at this point. This is before I went to Disney. I've never done an animated movie. I have no idea what to do here. And he was like, oh, don't think about kids. Forget them. Make it for yourself. Minus swearing, minus sex, minus drugs. Make it for yourself. We'll animate it. Kids will go. Don't even worry about them. Like, they don't want you to make it for them.
Yes.
They want you to make it for you.
Yes.
That's appropriate for them.
Brilliant.
And so that was really like how we approached the Hunger Games. We've approached all of our movies, which is like, we're just making it for ourselves. We're making the version we would want to see and hoping that other people want to see it too. And so, we shot the whole movie in North Carolina, first in Asheville.
Nina, it felt like a big, rowdy, talented, charismatic group of actors to like keep in line.
We had a blast, I have to say, like that group. And that is the thing, like when I thought to myself, like, I don't want to be a producer. Why would anybody want to be a producer? I learned from making movies exactly why people want to be producers, because being part of that rowdy group, getting to be one of the gang, part of the team, part of the crew, to watch the skills that people have, all the different people in their department heads, to look for like those inspirations and then try to find like the talent to, we worked with like Juliet Welfling, the editor, who had done A Prophet. And that movie was like a huge inspiration for Gary.
Amazing.
And if you really look at the way that he shot it with the long lenses and, the intimacy with which he shot it and the way that it was edited, I mean, also the beautiful freaking score from James Newton Howard. So during production, part of what I found so remarkable was that on the one hand, it's funny, like of course I didn't know it was going to be a hit on the one hand. On the other hand, the book did start to really blow up. Like on our watch while we were going, it started to become like a thing where you would see people, adults with the book, right? You'd go to the grocery store, you'd like see somebody have,
Totally. On the train. Totally.
It became like, you go on the subway in New York, whatever. Like people, that book, people would talk about it. I would always like eavesdrop on people talking about it. Like the book became a thing.
Yeah.
It's funny too, when you really think about like, what's the last book? Obviously Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Obviously Hunger Games. Twilight. But since that generation, like what's the last book that was really like a thing? And
totally. Yeah.
That everybody's reading and talking about. Because we're just like all kind of in our niches now.
And this like, it's almost inundated. It's like there's too much stuff for one thing to sort of rise above.
Yeah.
I was just talking about this. We just did Desperately Seeking Susan, and like that was like the moment of Madonna, right? When she like burst onto the scene, and it's like it's so hard to like compare that to kids today. I mean, maybe you could say that about Beyonce and Taylor Swift, but like it's so hard for one thing just to rise above everything else. And Hunger Games totally did that.
Yeah, no, and so I remember going to see Elvis Costello in Asheville. Great place to shoot, by the way. Like such good food, such good like music, like great bars. Like it was it was rowdy, but like it was a very fun group. And the youngsters and Woody, of course, like all really bonded. Like that was a very tight knit group. And honestly, like I felt like lucky to be in the club. I felt lucky to get to be one of them, to be part of it, to be like that connected to something that I loved so much and that these other people loved. And so I remember we were at Elvis Costello and he has like people come up on the stage and dance with him. And Jen got up on stage with her like best friend and was just dancing on stage. Nobody had any idea who she was. And I was like, you enjoy it, girl. Cause like, I bet you this won't last. Like you're just getting to be a girl who's a great actor, where you can just get up on stage with your best friend and have some fun. This will not last, it will not last. Your life is going to change.
And those shoots went on for months. They were not short shoots. It was like, you guys were a family.
They were not short shoots. I think we were like 6. Yes, we were. I think we shot like 67 days, something like that on the first one.
I mean, that's long. It's long.
And we were out, we built the cornucopia out in this incredible field where we all would like drive those little gators up there in the mud. You have to like sometimes shut down because of like bears.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we can't shoot there because there's a bear and a cub. So like, well, we have to all wait. And then we came down to Charlotte to shoot a lot of our capital stuff. But that whole first movie was made, in North Carolina. And we did so much, like practically, like you're having like this crazy big like chariot parade. Like we're having a chariot parade.
Oh my God.
With the horses and all the like craziness. Just doing it all, it was a very different time. I mean, I really like to do more practical than not. I think it really makes a difference. But, it was like big and unwieldy and exciting and fun. And like say, there was incredible camaraderie and closeness between people. It really was like, I understand now why people like this producing business. This is actually really fun.
Well, so we just interviewed Bruce Cohen about Silver Linings Playbook.
Yeah.
They hired Jen right after you guys finished with her. But like they didn't see any of Hunger Games. So it was just a Zoom audition that David O hired her off of. But like no one understood what a force of nature she was until she arrived on set. And I'm sure you felt the same way where it's like, oh, we're dealing with someone who's in it for the long haul. Right?
Yeah. I mean, she's the sort of next level. And one of the things that I find amazing about her is that, like, you know, there are actors who are really processy. She is not processy. She was like, I feel kind of guilty because, like, you know, I ever like doing all these things to prepare. And literally, she's like reading what she's shooting that morning.
No, stop.
Memorizing it while she's getting ready, goofing around up until the last minute.
Oh my God.
And then like turning around and like destroying you with her performance. Like it just,
yes.
You know, and maybe her system has changed since then, but we were like, well, you don't really need to change your system. It seems like it's working pretty well for you.
Whatever it is, it's working.
Yeah, just keep doing that. And like I say, the young cast got incredibly close.
Josh, Liam, Jen, like that crew.
And Woody and the young at heart.
Yeah, and the young at heart. The band leader.
Yeah. So, you know, it really was for me, both Wimpy Kid and being able to do Wimpy Kid with Brad. This one I didn't have Brad. I really missed him. You know, you realize how like lonely the job is.
Yes.
It can be very lonely. But it was the summer. It was a good time, so I could have my family with me a lot of the time. But it's still, producing is a very lonely job. You know, there are times when nobody likes you.
Yes.
And so it's good to have a partner because like, at least you can still like each other.
Were there any particularly tough moments during the shoot that you recall? Or once you got there, was it sort of like we all know what we're doing and we're all working in the same direction and it's a group that's happy to be there?
I mean, some of the tough moments were, you know, shooting with the long lens and the depth of field, the kind of approach. You know, you get a lot of shaky cam, right? And you don't always get scale. And so we had some fights about that, about like the balancing, the need for scale and scope, the shakiness of the camera. And like, you know, it's hard to question a filmmaker. Like, It depends on the person. Like Francis is super much like likes to have you like right next to him.
Yes.
In the village, but like that's not everybody. And you know, Gary and I, we had our battles, you know.
And you know, just speaking of that, because I'm always so fascinated. Because you're right, every producer sort of has like their own approach, and every director has their own approach. And it's rare that directors get to see other directors, but what was like unique about Gary? What was he like on set? Like, you know, what were his bag of tricks?
I think he is incredibly good with actors.
Mm-hmm.
I think he really knows how to put an actor at ease, how to get an actor to take risks, and his ability to, his writing, his ability to like adapt and pivot, and his ambition, you know, the kind of aiming high and the giving the audience, assuming your audience is smart and sophisticated, never pandering.
Yeah.
What I loved about these books is that they had young adult protagonists, but I not think of them as young adult books, even though that's where they are in the bookstore.
Yeah.
But I not think of them that way.
Yeah.
And Gary was that way too. He made a movie like Seabiscuit or like Pleasantville. Like he put all of that kind of the class, the intelligence, the elegance, the ambition. There was never a like, well, kids will like this, you know, going back to that make it for yourself. In the casting, like I say, having these just amazing actors. And, you know, his work with department heads, like I said, we had some bumpy moments along the way.
Totally. We
had a hilarious fight over the casting of the cat, Buttercup, because Gary cast a black and white cat to play Buttercup. I was like, and we had a big fight, and we weren't able on the first movie to recast the cat. But then on the second movie, and I think that cat's name was Sir Thomas. And Suzanne and I both were really driven crazy by the fact that Buttercup was clearly an orange cat named Buttercup, was cast as a black and white cat. And then we would have conversations. Do we think we could replace the cat in post?
Oh my God. I'm sure you priced that out just to see.
We had to paint a goat. We got a goat that was supposed to be Prim's goat, and it wasn't the right color. We had to like paint the little spots on the goat.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it was all safe. But
yeah,
yes,
sure.
It was like not so, but we had a lot of crazy moments that like you never think of as an executive because nobody tells you, and you're an executive, like you're going to be there while they're painting the goat. And now what are you going to do now that the goat has gotten wet? And now instead of having black spots, it's a gray goat. And now what are you going to do? But the fact that he always writes and directs from character for the actors knowing like that their performance and their what they are bringing is always going to be like the backbone of everything, and let like theme and story flow from character, and then to be able, say, to get these some amazing, like just beautiful raw moments that were so intimate. There are, I think of that moment before the games of like Peeta with Katniss in that window, and this like, I don't want to become a piece in their games, and if it comes to it, like I don't think I can kill anybody. I just, and it's just a beautiful, intimate, dramatic scene.
Yeah, I just keep wishing I could think of a way to show them that they don't own me. If I'm gonna die, I want to still be me. Does that make any sense?
I just can't afford to think like that.
Ladies and gentlemen, the star-crossed lovers from District 12, this year's victors of the 74th Annual Hunger Games!
I think that your movie, because of the success of it and the delicacy with which you handled it, it spawned, I don't want to call them copycats, but they were films that were basically echoes of the Hunger Games. And I just have to ask you, as someone who sort of like launched a trend, are you flattered by that? What were your feelings after seeing sort of like an entire movement happen after you did something well?
It's corny, but I mean, from your work as well, the movies you've made, like representation is everything. Representation is power. It is everything. And particularly having my own kids, raising, I have 2 boys and a girl in the middle, but raising a girl and realizing how rarely you got to look up at a big poster or
I love it.
Big screen and see somebody like that you could see yourself in, somebody who could be you. I mean, archery, like girls doing archery, like skyrocketed after that first movie. It's crazy, right? Like if you wonder whether what we do actually has an impact, like, and by the way, even, oh my God, some of the people I met on the tour and on the press tour for this last movie, for the prequel, right, were people who grew up. There's actually, I was so crazy. I was doing the Kelly Clarkson show with our cast and with Frances. And so then on the Kelly Clarkson show, there's this girl who actually, when she was in 8th grade, wrote a paper about the adaptation of the movies. And we were shooting Catching Fire by now. And actually, I invited her. We were doing pickups in New Jersey for like one little bit that we had to get that we couldn't get because of weather. We were doing pickups in New Jersey. Her mom flew her out there, brought her over to the set, and she is now working for Kelly Clarkson.
No, stop.
She brought the report that she did that has the picture of her in 8th grade, and she's like, I am doing what I'm doing because of the way I felt about these movies. I met a bunch of women who these movies shaped the direction that they took in their own lives. What more could you possibly ask for? And if more young people being the leads of movies, more opportunities, more representation,
yes,
better. Better. And by the way, when you make a movie for which there are no comps, you want to become a good comp, right? I'm sure Brad talked about this when you guys did Crazy Rich Asians. There are no comps for Crazy Rich Asians. There were no comps for Hunger Games. There were no comps. You want to become a good comp. And so it's exciting to have no comps. It's scary to have no comps. But if you are the comp, you feel like that's a win. And if it possible for somebody else to tell a story that particularly like is about young people changing the world or defying, rebelling, resisting? That's, like mission accomplished,
You're changing hearts and minds in a sort of fantastical way. You are changing hearts and minds while bringing in droves of young people to watch your movie under the auspices of just like an entertaining thing.
It's very easy to feel like powerless and that nothing that you do matters. And I think the reason that these books resonated so much is because young people do feel that what we have left them with are the Hunger Games, that in some way, many people feel that they're fighting to survive, that there are the haves and the have-nots, and to tell a story of defiance, of resistance, subversion, revolution that is still like fun just to go to the theater, but actually reminds people of their own power and of the perniciousness of the status quo. So the fact that there was a bunch of young adult movies that came after it, say good. Audiences will let you know whether you have given them what they want or not. Nothing is a franchise until an audience tells you it is. So I don't have any issue with that as long as more people are being seen and more people are seeing themselves.
I love that answer. You are a tremendous inspiration to me. You are brave and bold and so smart. And thank you for coming and sitting down and telling this story. I hope you will come back.
Oh, I will. This was great. It was really fun. No, I loved it. You helped me remember a lot of things that I'd forgotten because I have a terrible memory. It was really fun, actually. Thank you really very much. I had a great time.
Okay. Talk soon.
All right. Take care.
Okay. So Bex loved Nina Jacobson, loved the tale. She really is sort of an iconic producer and studio head. I loved her transparency with being fired from Disney.
Yeah, she was very open about that. And what a pivot, what a career she had after that, after leaving the job as the head of a studio and then having a career like this where she can produce movies like Hunger Games and Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and just to pivot like that and do something totally different and then be hugely successful is amazing.
It's incredible. I also loved how she sort of utilized her skills as a studio head at critical moments of the Hunger Games tale, right?
Yep.
When she had to sort of think like the studio to try to convince them to stick to their release date, which I think was like the top of spring break.
Yep.
I thought that was like so brilliant, and not every producer can do that because they just have never sat in that chair,
Yeah.
They're responsible for other things than we're responsible for. And Nina had like the ability to like sort of hop back and forth between the sort of creative producer and the head of the studio. So I thought that was very cool.
Yeah, it's very easy for filmmakers to make the suits the bad guys. And I love that she said she knew how to not make the suits the bad guys because she understood where they were coming from.
Totally. So just a badass. She's the Katniss of film producers. And so we love that. So this week, loyal listeners, we're going to like pivot a little bit because Hunger Games is such an enormous franchise. The film that's out right now is doing so well. I think it's sort of surpassing expectations, which is so great for Nina and Brad and Color Force in general. So we're thrilled for them. But, when a film is made many, many years ago, it's often difficult for the loyal producers to remember every detail. So I want you to sort of tell our loyal listeners some of the like extraordinary things that actually happened on set.
Yeah, as complicated as this movie probably was to shoot, there are some fun facts. So first one is, while they were horsing around on the set, Jennifer Lawrence accidentally kicked Josh Hutcherson in the head, knocking him out and resulting in a concussion.
I can attest that this feels accurate and true. As you guys, loyal listeners know, Elizabeth Banks is a dear friend, and she played
Effie
Trinket, who she really lobbied for that role. I do know that.
She's so good in it.
She's so good in it. She knew Gary Ross, the director, from their work on Seabiscuit. And so that's how she got the role. But in any event, she said that Woody Harrelson, which Nina sort of indicated, was sort of the Pied Piper of this group of young, talented, energetic filmmakers. And they would like do crazy things and hang out all the time. At one point, they were like cutting avocados with machetes and just like they were always horsing around. So that feels like the kick to the head to Hutcherson feels like it could have happened.
Well, what's funny to me about that fun fact is that it happened not during an action scene, not while they were shooting something, just where they were horsing around on set. Yeah. It wasn't like, oops, I accidentally kicked you and I was supposed to fake kick you.
Right. This wasn't a stunt.
We were just having fun.
It was in between a shot.
Right.
That's classic. Right. Okay, what's next?
So there was a swear jar on set, and Gary Ross said that half of the swear jar was contributed by Jennifer Lawrence.
That feels also accurate. Just watching her interviews, literally, it just feels like she's really got a truck driver's mouth, but in a great way. I mean, again, we also, heard about her strength and courage and just like no bullshit approach on Silver Linings Playbook. Yep. I think part of that is just really having like no fear, no filter. So that swear jar tale sort of feels accurate also.
And I think that's probably true. Part of the reason why everyone fell in love with Jennifer Lawrence, because she was so real. Mm-hmm. She had no filter, and she was just being herself in interviews. And especially when she first became big, I feel like most stars were kind of buttoned up and like PR trained.
Yes.
And she kind of broke that. I was like, I'm just going to be myself.
Right.
Which I applaud.
And man, that's really worked for her. Yeah. So it's good. It's good to hear.
Well, continuing on the Jennifer Lawrence talk,
this could just become the Jennifer Lawrence podcast.
Jennifer Lawrence podcast.
The amount we've been talking about Jennifer Lawrence.
Jennifer Lawrence movie.
She's our patron saint.
Well, we have heard how she every time that she's come in for an audition, she has blown people away.
Yes, totally.
So that happened here.
Yeah.
But unsurprisingly, this was the role of Katniss was a very coveted role.
Sure.
And kind of every young actress in Hollywood was going out for it.
Yeah.
So we have heard that Chloe Grace Moretz, Saoirse Ronan, Haley Steinfeld, and Shailene Woodley were all up for the role. But Nina Jacobson said at this podcast that after Jennifer Lawrence's audition, they knew that no one was going to be able to touch that.
And those other actresses, I think, were probably more established. Those other ladies had been in a couple more films. So, again, it just is testament to like just being courageous, going for it, no holds barred. The Jennifer Lawrence approach to life. Okay, well, that was good.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be it, right, Andrew? We haven't been talking about Andrew enough and how much we love our podcast producer. He's like such a great guide. He rarely comes on. I don't know if our loyal listeners even know he exists. Will you come just say hi for a second, Andrew? I know you have to do this on your Elvis Duran show all the time.
Hi, everybody.
Anyways, that's your first intro. The behind the scenes on how this thing gets made. And anyways, thanks for listening. That was another fun one. And Bex, you do the wrap up.
Thank you for listening and liking and subscribing. Please remember to continue to do that. Follow us on Instagram at Stay Gold Features. DM us with any questions, any comments, any producers or films that you want us to have on the podcast. And if you liked us doing these fun facts and talking about some more of these behind the scenes details, let us know. We'll do it more because that was fun.
That was fun. All right. Bye, guys. Stay gold.
Stay gold.